In the last video, I talked about the danger of putting too much trust in the morality of Christian leaders. And in that video, in the comment section, I got a few questions about how Christianity could still be true if God could allow his leaders to stumble so much. As this commenter asked, how can God use somebody so much who is in sin? And man, do I got a lot to say about this one. In this video, I'm going to show why rather than it showing that Christianity is false when the Christian leaders fell, it actually helps to show the truth of Christianity in a way that other religions simply can't do. So let's go ahead and get right into it. If this is your first time here, go ahead and hit that sub button. And meme team, you guys ready? Then let's go! So Christianity is true and God hates sin. As the commenter asked, how could God use people who are in sin? I think there's a couple of ways to answer this question. The first answer to the question is pretty straightforward. If God didn't use people who sin, then think about how bad of a place the world would be. Like, who would God even use in order to bring good into this world? In the Bible, we learn that all have fallen short and all of our righteous works are filthy rags because they're tainted with sin and selfishness. God using people who sin and sin hard shouldn't actually be very shocking to us because the Bible describes this. If God could use David and Noah, Jonah, Peter, Paul, Thomas, and the rest of them, then he can use people who sin. All of us have sinned, and all of us will continue to battle with sin as long as we're in these bodies. As Paul says in Romans 7, although I want to do good, evil is right there with me. For in my inner being, I delight in God's law. But I see another law at work in me, waging war against the law of my mind and making me a prisoner of the law of sin at work within me. What a wretched man I am. Who will rescue me from this body that is subject to death? Thanks be to God who delivers me through Jesus Christ our Lord. So then, I myself in my mind am a slave to God's law, but in my sinful nature, a slave to the law of sin. So the point here is that if God couldn't use people who sin, then he wouldn't be able to use anyone. And being a Christian or a Christian leader doesn't automatically make you immune from sin, because if it did, then Paul would have wasted a lot of time spending so much time telling the church how to be more moral and how to be better. Not to mention, you don't get more of a Christian leader than Paul the Apostle, and even he describes the struggle. Now secondly, and similar to the last point, the authors of the Bible were concerned about truth and realistic expectations rather than flattery and false expectations. And in my mind, this helps to support the claim that Christianity is true. So think about it. If you were inventing a religion that you wanted people to follow, how would you make your prophets look in your holy book? Probably like some incredibly moral and spiritual people. You'd want to describe them as far more moral and brave than the rest of us mere humans. That's actually pretty much what we find in virtually every other religion in the world. Prophets are usually described as being more moral or more spiritual or more brave than other people. But it's almost the opposite in Christianity. The authors of the Bible record most of the leaders in a more negative social light. It's negative, but it's honest. In the Bible, the leaders usually don't fit people's expectations about what a spiritual or a moral leader is supposed to look like. This is why an Old Testament leader like Moses could actually mess things up so bad. And David could be an adulterer and a murderer, Noah could be a drunk, Jonah could be either a racist or a coward, and so on. Because the goal of the Old Testament writers obviously wasn't to make them or their religion look good. And the New Testament doesn't do much better. Peter, the leader of the early church, who some skeptics want to say was in on a con to try to invent Christianity, well, if he would have been doing that, then he would have been doing a pretty bad job of doing so, since he looked bad on so many occasions. Not only did he fold under pressure and act contrary to the gospel, essentially kind of denying the gospel when he was with the Jewish groups, he also denied Jesus 3 times when he was needed the most. And the apostles, not only were the apostles described as not being smart enough to understand what Jesus was telling them half of the time, but the Bible also records how they chickened out and actually went into hiding after Jesus was captured and crucified because they were too scared. And even Jesus didn't meet the expectations of the people at his time. When it comes to Jesus, the Jews were expecting somewhat of a Jewish Rambo for a Messiah. Instead of him coming in all macho, Jesus came as meek and humble, and he put his power aside. He came as a servant, and when one of his disciples tried to defend him by using a sword, Jesus resisted it and told him he needed to put his sword down. Not only that, but he was also captured and then crucified, which is obviously something that they weren't expecting to happen to a Messiah. That's something else that you wouldn't want to create if you were inventing a story. So once again, notice how the Bible is more concerned with truth than it is with making people look better than they actually are. Over and over in the Bible, we see that the teachers and the leaders in the Bible weren't spiritual rock stars. They just weren't. Yes, they were called to a higher purpose, but they were also just normal people like all of us who God actually used to get his message out. So when it comes to the moral failings of these Christian leaders, it's actually the failure of these teachers that help to remind us where our attention should be when it comes to salvation. It shouldn't be men, because it's not the moral lives that they live that save us, but instead it should be on Christ, since his moral life is the one that saves us. So ironically, the fact that Christian leaders can and do fall really just seems to emphasize the main point of the Bible. The main point of the Bible is not that we're good enough to save ourselves, but it's a reminder that every time that we think we are, we realize that we're not. And it's because of that that God had to come into our world to do it for us, and he chose to do so because of how much he loves us. So what we learn is that rather than these moral failures of these Christian leaders proving Christianity to be false, it actually adds evidence to the claim that Christianity is true. Now, as Christians, we're all called to live holy and to be better and to live a better life. And this video in no way is meant to downplay some of the awful things that some of these Christian leaders have done. But even though we're called to live holy and do better, that isn't the reason why we're saved. These moral ethics is how we're supposed to live, but these moral ethics that we have aren't what saves us. So we strive to live these morally perfect lives because it helps us love our neighbor, and also because it honors God, and many other reasons. So when these Christian leaders fall, it reminds me of the reason why we're saved in the first place. And that's because the human heart is so opposed to what's good in God by nature that we need the life that Christ lived on our behalf. So I don't look to the morality of these leaders as the reason why we're saved, but instead, I look to these leaders and their morality as a reminder of why we needed Jesus to die for us in our place. Now, if you want some more examples of how God used fallen men to make the world a much better place, in this video, I talk about all the ways that Christianity has changed the world for the better, and this helps us to realize just how much God has done things through imperfect Christians. So go ahead and click here to see what I mean. But the next time that you find yourself wondering how God can use sinful people to do so much good, what are you going to say? What do you mean?